Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us. And today we're going to hear from some of the folks who have helped us craft this legislation, and then we're going to have plenty of time for question and answer, with the caveat that some of these things are going to continue to be worked out over the period between when the law was passed and when we have it go into effect. So bearing that in mind, we are really happy to welcome you all here today. And this is just a reminder, this is a meeting, not a webinar. So you do have the ability to unmute yourselves, but while we're going through the presentation, if you could please keep yourself muted, and then during the Q&A, we will have folks put their questions in the chat, and there might be an opportunity, if we get through all of the chat questions, to open it up to discussion, and you can unmute yourselves and we can talk about it. But thank you all so much. So let's get started. My name is Alice Morrison, and I am one of the two co-executive directors of Friends of Family Farmers, and I am the co-executive director of Policy and Development. So I worked with our community outreach engagement manager and our legislative advisory team and all of you to help develop this set of priorities that we worked on in the 2023 session. And I wanted to highlight how we came to the decision to work on this particular issue. So FOF has a very strong history of working on only issues that our farmers tell us are important to them. So during the FOF 2022 focus groups and the Family Farm Survey, thank you to all of you who perhaps participated in that process last year. We got reports that there needed to be some updates to this law. Sometimes folks felt that there were unclear guidelines. We heard cases of unequal enforcement, some folks being told a product was okay in one area and some folks being told there was a problem in another. And we wanted to clear all of those things up. There were also some frustrations with the limitation of the law that didn't seem to keep up with the times. And we have new research from our partners at OSU that tell us more about food safety and what can and cannot be produced safely, in line with the intent of the Farm Direct Law. So then we started the process of developing a proposal to bring to the legislature. And who was involved in that policy creation? So obviously we just talked about farmers and the farmers that we serve. Farmers market managers were also really instrumental in helping us craft something that's workable. Food hub operators, food safety experts, and OSU researchers. There are some other folks on this call who helped us a lot with this policy creation. I know Rebecca Landis is here. I know Joy Waite-Kusick is here. And some of our other speakers today were all involved in the policy creation process. And I want to say a heartfelt thank you for all of your input and patience and all of those things as we move forward. And we also could not do this without the support of our legislative champions. And I think that Senator Jeff Golden just joined us in the room, and I wanted to make some space to say thank you so much to Senator Jeff Golden and let him give you a little introduction to his side of this law and how that came to be. So thank you so much for being with us, Senator.
Sure, Alice, it's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, take it away. Say whatever you'd like.
Is it 507 you most want to hear about? That's the message I got.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I would love to take all the credit for bringing this to the legislature and thinking of it and all of that, but that wouldn't be true. It actually was sponsored by Senator Suzanne Weber, Republican senator from the Astoria area. Don't know where she got it, but when I first heard it in committee or saw it among bills that I could hear in committee, I got pretty excited. And there was a back and forth. I don't know if Alice, how actively involved you were in negotiations. There was primarily someone who I'm not going to remember, and someone who represented the public health directors in the different counties, because the idea was to expand the offerings as much as possible and retain a very high level of confidence in public safety. And so I remember discussions about canned and steam canned foods, and could people get comfortable enough with them? And that went back and forth pretty amicably. And I would say the last, or maybe the major point, was there was some interest in having no cap at all on total annual sales volume of this. Status quo, the existing law had a $20,000 cap for total revenues for these farm direct businesses. And I couldn't get behind lifting the cap because there's a whole, entirely, that is to say, because there's a whole industry of manufacturers who, some of them large, some not very much larger than the folks you were trying to help, who have fully certified kitchen and manufacturer licenses that are quite a bit more expensive. There's quite a bit more regulation. And, if people wanted not to have limits on their revenue, that's what they should do. They should have those kinds of kitchens and whatnot. So in the end, went back and forth, and in the new bill, the annual cap was lifted from $20,000 to $50,000. That's what was in the final bill. And the other issue was, what kind of third parties, if you're really going to be farm direct, what kind of third parties can be involved? Okay, so you're not talking about retailers, stores, third-party retailers. That's not farm direct, but people wanted the ability to get help from marketers of different kinds who didn't grow the food. It wasn't the food producer who would be marketing them in these cases. And I think one of the very last pieces was to include and allow internet sales and internet marketers, as long as the sale was being made by the producer of the food, they could do it online. And also another requirement was the buyer had to be in Oregon. Otherwise at some point you're going beyond what the sense of farm direct is. So we expanded the items that can be sold, into, more jams, more nut butters, more canned items than before. And not everything was allowed, but as I say, there was a conversation that went beyond my competence about where can you, with fairly minimal inspection, feel quite safe. You wouldn't have any kind of disease outbreak from, or any kind of contamination or poisoning. And that's where we ended up. And we hope it makes the business viable for more people. And my own sense is anything we can do to strengthen local food systems is to the good. And I hope this turns out to be a pretty good step in that direction. But
Yeah.
I'll also recognize Senator Knope. He did some negotiating on this and was reasonable to help bring it over the line. And with his support, we had a unanimous vote in the Senate, except for Senator Robinson, who votes no on just about everything. And it had all yes votes with some absent folks in the House.
Thank you so much. And I also just wanted to say thank you for being our committee chair in our first hearing over in the Senate, and the way that you conducted that hearing and helped us set together a panel to help educate everyone on the committee who maybe hadn't heard of this issue before and needed to be brought up to speed on where we were and where we're going. I really appreciated the work that you did helping us put together that hearing, and it was really instructive for everyone involved. So thank you so much.
I'm really glad to hear that. It reminds me of that food is the space with the most, so far, the most potential for bipartisan progress. And I say that as someone who was quite involved in the GMO ban in Jackson County in 2014. And we brought together, that had the strongest, strangest bedfellows, strongest alliance left and right of any issue I've worked on. And, you get to trying to strengthen local food systems and offer people healthy food more directly without a lot of middlemen. And you got the makings of real bipartisan work. And so this was one of the easier bills of the session. Alice, did you want to hear about 789, the canola bill, or was that for another day?
That is another lunch and learn that we're going to be having, I believe, next month. So today is all about 507.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. And I know that the senator can't stay with us the entire time. So if there's any questions directly for Senator Golden, if you want to throw those in the chat right now. And then after we get through any questions, we're going to go on to Kelly Straight and Joy Waite-Cusick from OSU, our food safety experts, to talk about what's in the bill and the food safety implications and how we got to where we are from their end.
If anybody, what I might recommend as a general practice, and specifically here, if you haven't already, is a thank you letter to Senator Weber. Yes,
definitely.
If I can hang in for a little bit, I'd like to, and then I'm get off to some other things.
Of course, yeah. And I see some thank yous in the chat for helping us get such an early hearing at the beginning of the session. That was super helpful to just start the process right out of the gate. And yeah, all right. Well, I think we will collect any questions that come in for you. If you want to hang out, we're going to have some Q&A at the end, but if you have to move on to something else, we'll make sure that you get those questions and can connect with those folks.
I'll be here for 10 or 15 minutes.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you. Awesome. So this next part of this effort that I wanted to highlight is that we have really been partnering with our folks at OSU and all of the work that they've been doing to help us make sure that food safety is always at the top of our list, and making sure that that is the guidance that we have to make sure that all of the products that we're putting out there are wholesome and benefiting the community and benefiting the farmers that are creating them. So without further ado, I want to introduce two of the folks at OSU who've really helped us in this regard. Kelly Straight is here, and I see Joy Waite-Cusick on the line as well. I know, Kelly, if you want to kick us off and we can dive right into what's in the bill and all the specifics.
All righty. Well, thank you, Friends of Family Farmers, for hosting this webinar, and thanks to everybody who is in attendance. This is very exciting times for farmers who want to take a product to market. So anyway, just to continue on the path that Senator Golden started us on, this new bill, Senate Bill 507, expands the product list now to include big leaf maple and walnut syrup, processed fruit and vegetable juices, and those would be fruit and vegetable juices that are processed in a steam canner and or a water bath canner. Herbal blends such as herbal tea or dried blends were added. I have to say I was seeing a lot of that anyway, but now we've written it into the actual bill so people will feel better about doing it, because there was really no food safety risk initially in doing that. It was probably a product that was overlooked initially. Products produced, I just mentioned, including steam canning, are allowed. back when the original bill was passed in 2011, we didn't have research-based studies that proved that steam canning was a food safe process. And what happened is in 2016, the University of Wisconsin did some studies that showed that steam canning was a safe process to use. So steam canning has been added to the list of allowable processes. Freeze drying has also been added. You know, we allow dehydrated food products, but we didn't write in freeze-dried products initially. And actually, freeze-dried products are even less water content, obviously, than dehydrated products. So again, it's probably something that might have originally been left out. Although I will tell you, my research that I've started to do to get up to speed about food drying to be able to educate farmers on who may want to do this is there is a significant financial investment to take on freeze drying, which may also be a little bit of a barrier for some. Senator Golden mentioned that we're now going to allow interstate online sales of eligible products. Literally, this was a farm direct law, meaning that the farmer had to put the product directly into the customer's hands. And I think Caitlin's going to speak a little bit later on food hubs. And so along with interstate online sales of eligible products, we're also going to allow that there can be a middle person there who is handing off the product to the consumer, whereas before that was not allowed. And then he also mentioned the increase in the gross sales limit to $50,000 a year from the original $20,000, which opens up, I think, some folks doing maybe multiple products versus what they were doing before, and also helps with some of the inflation that's taken place over the years. So Alice, did you want me to also at this point talk about the next steps and timeline for implementation, or did you want to hold off on that for a minute?
I think it would be helpful to share the communication that we've been having with ODA and what folks should look for, especially that effective date.
Okay. So, you know, at OSU, we play a key role partnering with everybody to be able to educate small farmers and on how to interpret this law and implement it and take products to market. So when the bill was signed, I reached out to ODA, and Rusty Rock, who is a program director with the ODA Food Safety Division, got back to me at the beginning of July to let me know that ODA is developing a timeline associated with revising what's called the OARs, or the Oregon Administrative Rules, which basically explain how we're going to implement, what the guidance is going to be to support the law that's been passed. And if I'm not saying that quite right, those of you who know legislative stuff better than I do, go ahead and jump in. But this is kind of, you know, my understanding. So in order to do that, to develop some new OARs, the Food Safety Division is forming what they're calling an advisory committee. And it's being headed up by 2 of their staffers. And so what they've begun doing is they're now working on developing a draft rule to present to their Food Safety Advisory Committee. And when I talked to Rusty at the beginning of July, their timeline was the end of July. So it would be about this time frame right now. So by law, ODA has to have a completed draft published to the Secretary of State for posting in their bulletin before the end of August. And after they do that, a public hearing has to happen for at least 14 days after the posting of that. So Rusty also stressed that it's important that the public and the farm direct community understand that right now the laws have not changed at all. We still have to work under the 2011 guidance. and that the new law would go into effect after September 25th is when the new OARs and the new law would actually take effect. ODA communicated with me that they are happy to have folks communicate with them any questions and thoughts that they have regarding the changes in the statutes and their perspectives and experience on what these potential rules should look like. And then again, you know, representing OSU, we're going to be active participants in the process. We've been asked to review the draft rules and also assist with updating their educational handouts. They have 3 educational handouts associated with Farm Direct. And I worked with them like on their latest, and I think Al, and as well as Rebecca Landis, on updating their handouts a couple of years ago. So now we'll need to update their handouts. And we have a couple of publications within OSU that we'll be working on updating as well. And as soon as those publications are updated, we will be sure to share those out with everybody. So, you know, that they will know that those are available.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I just wanted to jump in to say that I also met with Rusty on Friday, and he echoed that, yes, there will be by that effective date, because in the law, it did say 90 days after the sine die, this will go into effect. Like Kelly said, September 25th is when all of these changes actually go into effect. And they do still plan to have the rules finalized by that time and have them recorded in the Secretary of State's logs on October 1st. And we have a question in the chat. Can we see a draft of the rules before it goes to Secretary of State? Yes, they have told us that it will follow a normal rulemaking process as Kelly outlined, but we will be able to, there's a public comment period on the draft rules, which is required by law. So there will be an opportunity for anyone in the state or elsewhere actually to make comments on the draft rules before it gets put into the record. And Friends of Family Farmers will be all over making sure everyone knows about the public comment period. So if you are part of our email list and that's how you heard about this event today, don't worry, you will be notified when that public comment period on the draft rules gets announced. Yeah. Joy, do you want to chime in and add anything about the products or the changes to the law?
Hi, everybody. Joy Witt-Cusick. I'm an associate professor at Oregon State food safety microbiologist. So I wore that hat as part of this particular exercise. So I didn't prepare anything today. Kelly did an awesome job introducing everything. So I've just been behind the scenes, I think, helping a little bit. But I don't have anything else to add. It's just, I'm happy to see this happening.
Great. Thank you all so much. And we're so grateful for your expertise and your cooperation with the whole process as we go into rulemaking and representing our little coalition as we move forward. As you all heard in Kelly's explanation and Senator Golden's explanation, there are some new sales outlets available to these products under SB 507. You can now, under the facilitation of sales type model, have some online sales facilitated by an aggregator if you're doing what's called cross-docking. I talked to the folks at ODA on Friday, and they wanted to emphasize that they're still making the rules. We heard all about the rulemaking process, and nothing is finalized until those rules are put into the statute. But they also said that they are reading this rule as helping us to facilitate sales through cross-docking, meaning that the retailer is not taking possession of your product, but they are simply helping you get an order directly from the person, and you are putting that into an order box that perhaps has other local foods available to it. That has been a process that was popularized during the pandemic and is now represented in the business models of people like the North Coast Food Web Food Hub up in Astoria, the Klamath Online Farmers Market, Lane County Bounty, Milk Run, all of these things that have become permanent fixtures of our landscape. And we wanted to open those businesses up to the choice to take farm direct producer process exemption products. And we have with us today, Caitlin Seifried, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Caitlin, who is formerly of the Astoria Food Hub and was one of our main points of contact on this part of the law. So I want to open the floor to Caitlin so she can tell you a little bit more about what this means for new sales outlets.
Yeah, thanks so much. Huge thanks to Senator Golden and to Friends of Family Farmers for prioritizing this and putting it forward. So I'm Caitlin Seifried. I worked at the North Coast Food Web up in Astoria. We're a small nonprofit that through the pandemic created an online farmers market to help make it easier for farmers to connect with customers. And that market's still going on. And through that process, like Alice was saying, through that process, we ran into like lots of issues with what products could be sold in our market as a kind of weird sales channel that we are, what licensing folks needed and what they could sell farm direct and not. And those decisions actually were so confusing that they like depended on who we spoke to at ODA. And I think we were all just in a big confusing pile about it. So having clarity on what exactly those products are that can go through a food hub like ours is really awesome to have this bill. So the main thing that we hope that this bill will do, and it looks like it's going to end up doing through the eventual rulemaking, is expanding products that a hub like ours can sell. And a big note is that there's different models for food hubs, and some food hubs buy products and resell to customers. And so that's considered retail, and that's a different category to farm direct completely. So in this conversation, in this bill, we're really talking about, we call it consignment sales. And that's kind of what Alice was referring to, the cross-docking. So our food hub and some food hubs around the state, they don't purchase and resell the products. They have we take possession of the products in the morning for customers' orders, and they go out in the afternoon. So we're not taking ownership of those products. And so the bill expanded what farmers could sell through our platform. Well, sorry, it will, hopefully when the rulemaking, the bill will expand the products that can be sold through hubs like ours. And a thing to note, if you're looking at the bill or looking at overviews, one-pagers in the future, is that there's separate sections for the different products. So one is farm direct for direct marketing. I'm the farmer, I'm handing you my jam. There's a separate section for these consignment sales where I'm the farmer, I might hand it to a third-party food hub who's helping me sell that product and get it to the final customer. So that would be I believe it's section 3 if you're looking at the bill, and hopefully we'll get some beautiful like one-pagers so you don't have to read through the actual bill. But yeah, so just note that the product list for consignment is more strict than the direct farmer to customer product list. And let's see, there was a great note from Rebecca, I believe, that the consignment model is also used at farmers markets. Your local farmers market might have a consignment booth. And it would be good if you're running the market or participating in that, if you're a farmer that's looking to sell through a consignment model, to stay aware of this rulemaking and make sure that your farmers market knows about it. And if you're the farmers market, make sure you're chatting with your local ODA representative, your food safety inspector, because it does expand what products can be sold at that consignment booth. Again, with the caveat, hopefully after the final rules are made. So I think that's all. I mean, I should call out the two main categories, and other folks on the call that are more expert, please help me out on this. But the two main categories that are expanded in SB 507 for consignment is for dried fruits and herbs, and then fruit syrups, preserves, jams, vegetables that are acidified products, producer processed products. So that is more strict than the farm direct set of products, like I mentioned. So make sure you're paying attention to those two different lists. Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is if you're a food hub or you're developing a food hub, or you're the farmer's market with a consignment booth, there's a great network, the Oregon Food Hub Network, run by the Oregon Community Food Systems Network. And I'll pop the link in the chat, but if you're trying to figure out how SB 507 will impact your sales, definitely stay connected with Friends of Family Farmers, and also connect with this Food Hub network, because I guarantee you they'll be chatting over the next several months and about next season's sales and what they can include. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. We have quite a few questions in the chat, and I'm hoping that even if they're being answered in text form by our experts, I am still going to read them out so that they can go onto the recording record for this webinar, and folks in the future can benefit from them as well. So without further ado, I think we're going to go into our Q&A section of this presentation. We have a question from Rose. Hi, Bear. Hi, Rose. How you doing? About elderberry syrup. Is elderberry syrup or other health products included in the expansion? Kelly, I think you put a note in the chat, but could you elaborate for the recording?
Sure. I mean, we just don't have the food safety data for it. And I am happy to share, I can pull a couple of public extension, tested publications that explain it, a little bit more in detail, what we know and what we don't know about the safety of products that are produced using elderberries. So I'm happy to do that. But right now, no, they would not be allowed because we don't have that safety data.
All right. And we have two questions from Sonia in the chat. The first is steam can / water bath can fruit and vegetable juices are added. Does this mean that they are first boiled, or you just put the raw juice right in the jar? I know this might be something we work out specifically in the rulemaking and advising or editing the guides, but Kelly, what is your
So yeah, and Joy might have a different opinion. I mean, as long as you are following an approved tested recipe for processing a juice, it doesn't, because you're going to be processing it. So, that's going to build in the food safety aspect of that. So it shouldn't matter whether you're starting with a raw or like a juice that you initially got, like putting it, like where you'll take berries or some other type of raw fruit product, right? And you'll put it through a steam juicer to extract the juice, and then you process that. So, people will then water bath can juice that way. Or you could also, I'm thinking maybe this is crossing over a little bit into raw cider, which I think is going to be a separate issue that we're going to have to deal with. I mean, I think you could take raw apple juice and process it. I mean, I think, Alice, you're right. We probably in the rulemaking process want to get really clear about that, because there's a lot of gray zone out there about that, depending on who you talk to, if we're going to treat raw apple juice the same way. But otherwise, to me, from a food safety standpoint, again, because you're putting it through a tested process, that final product would be considered safe.
And can you reiterate what are the tested and safe processes, and if any of those, what this bill does to that list of processes, are there any changes there?
So the main changes are like what I mentioned before, you know, where we had dehydration as an approved processing method. Now we're also going to allow freeze drying. That's a main process that was added. And then steam canning, because like I said, we didn't have safety data back in 2011 when the bill was first crafted that supported the processing of products using steam canners. And then in 2016, University of Wisconsin produced that data. So as of 2016, steam canning is considered an approved process. And OSU actually has publications on the proper use of steam canners. And
And so,
again,
yeah, and so does that mean that with these new processes, we should still be directing people to look at the OSU publications regarding these processes, and those are your approved recipes to look at?
yes, I mean, you have the USDA Guide to Home Canning, okay, complete guide to home canning. You have the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and one of their often used publications is their So Easy to Preserve book. There are the OSU publications, also many of those are known as PNWs because they combine Idaho, Washington, and Oregon together in a region. But you can also go to another cooperative extension website and pull a recipe from their food preservation resources. That would also be considered an approved recipe resource.
So
Is that
anything coming from yeah, that's definitely good to just say that out loud. USDA Guide to Home Canning, the Home Food Preservation Institute that's out of the University of Georgia, our PNW cooperative extensions, and cooperative extension programs from other land grant universities who operate an extension program.
Right.
And Rebecca, I see your hand up.
Okay, so I just want to tie this back to the rules. The rules are where this comes in the current law that we're about to have change. So that's why we need to very carefully read the draft that we get, and hopefully we'll get one longer than we'll get one before it actually goes public, so that if there's something that needs clarifying that would confuse everyone, that could be dealt with quickly perhaps. But the current rules specify exactly which products have limited recipes and which ones do not. And just for the record, I believe it is only the vinegar, pickles, and sauerkraut sort of class of things that have the absolute requirement that you use a certain set of recipes. And the alternative to that also is that if you have a different process, you have to go to a process authority and ask them to review everything, including the product, your whole process, and you pay them for that service. Otherwise, you follow one of the things that are written in the rules. So if we have, if any of the new processes that are added, if the food safety people feel it's important for us to limit the recipes and they have a good reason for that, then I would support that. But I wouldn't support having limited recipes unless there's a valid food safety reason for that. And when there is, we'll hear that. Hopefully we'll hear that from Joy and Kelly, and we'll be able to feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick on this. I don't want the juice one to sound like it's a free-for-all and all juice is in now, right? So vegetable juice would be very limited to those things that are already acidic, which is basically tomatoes. There aren't going to be many other options that fall into this, unless Kelly, is there something I'm missing?
No, thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for that. You actually have more experience in the area of dealing with that gray zone around juices than I do at this point.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, the elderberry question came into, right? So we're dealing with those things that span or go above 4.6 are the problematic things. For shelf stability, if we're refrigerating, which that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about ad nauseum, then that's a different issue. But we just have to be real careful with reading the rules, like Rebecca said.
I also just posted it in the chat, a elderberry publication.
Great. Thank you all for this robust discussion. And this really drives the point home that we are still operating under our current rules until September 25th, and at that time, the new rules will be put out by ODA, and there will be OXU extension publication updates. Hopefully by that time, if nothing else, goes wrong in the process. Rulemaking, depending on the level of engagement, can be drawn out. If there's, extensive public comment or multiple drafts. So we're hoping that we are able to come together in a cohesive way and provide our comments really clearly. Another plug to stay abreast of Friends of Family Farmers newsletter and opportunities for comments so we can get together on this. I know I have another question in the chat, which I think we've already answered, but Stacy asks, will there be written information on all these changes? And I think our answer is yes, soon, but not now, because there will be written information from ODA and from OSU when the rulemaking process has concluded. Is that comfortable for folks? Great. We have a question from Jane. Please talk about labeling requirements. If anybody wants to jump in and talk about, I don't think that this bill made any changes to the labeling requirements.
I can probably address that. Labeling requirements are not, for the most part, they're really not any different than something that is licensed, except that there is a certain two maybe required additional things that have to go on every Farm Direct label. I actually find that that's been the most difficult part of the Farm Direct bill up to this point. People thought, well, we're exempt, we'll just throw Happy Farm fruit, Corvallis, Oregon, and run with it. And I have to come up and say, hey, it's deregulated, but it's not unregulated. You have to put some stuff on your labels. So I agree. We did not touch labeling in the changes to the law, but now it's even more important, I think, that now that we're going to be able to have third-party help clearly, and that the consignment of things in jars is now going to be clearly legal, it's all the more important that we take a moment and figure out how to slap some labels on the jars that comply. And it's not rocket science. I just feel like there's people get excited that they can do this stuff, and then they've made it and everything, and then they don't want to follow through and finish that little bit. So we'll just need to encourage people to do that.
And just to reiterate, the labeling requirements are, the product name, the ingredients list, the address where it's produced, the net weight of the product, and the statement. This is made in, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't memorized the statement. But
I wouldn't even try. It's different in the statute than it is in the administrative rules. And yeah, but we just need to teach people, don't freelance this, don't just do it off the top of your head. Go find the piece of paper that we get, that FOF or OSU or ODA gave you, and put exactly what it says on there word for word. And then just use that same label over and over again until and unless the law changes.
The wording in the statute, which was not changed by this bill, is this product is homemade and is not prepared in an inspected food establishment.
That's correct. It's just that when it came to eggs and honey, I believe the ODA wisely determined that homemade eggs were probably not the right phraseology.
Right.
Yeah. So be sure to, I think OSU actually released a very helpful guide to farm direct egg production it was either earlier this year or late in 2022, one of their most recent publications. And there will be some really clear guidance on how you need to label your eggs. So watch out for that as well.
So Alice, I'm happy to look up the egg thing and post it. And I just posted our OSU publication on the Oregon Farm Direct Marketing Law in the chat. And granted, that's going to need to be slightly updated now, right? But as we've been saying, the labeling information has not changed. So there is a section in there that tells you exactly what the label has to, what text the label has to have. And I'll look for the egg publication.
And I also want to be clear in this space that we are only talking about updates to 507, the Farm Direct Producer Process Exemption. And that means that you as the farmer are growing, not raising, because we're not talking about meat products here. We're talking about growing the produce that is the primary ingredient of your product. We are not talking about the changes that were made to the home bakery bill. That was Senate Bill 643. And that does have some labeling changes, but that is for products that are not farm direct. So I just want to be clear that we're making sure we understand the scope of this. There is another bill talking about changes to the home bakery bill. That's SB 643, and we'll have more information on that one coming later, because that one doesn't go into effect until January 1st of 2024. So no changes on that front with non-farm direct products until 2024. I see some more questions. Patty asked, the farmer still needs to process the product themselves and on site. I think that was in the previous bill. Yes, that is true. I think that that's something to emphasize, especially with the juice component. That's something I talked specifically to ODA about in my meeting last week, that this will not change anything about like pressing juice live on site at a farmer's market or community event. That would not be considered farm direct because it's not being produced at the farm. If you're taking a cider press to a farmer's market, you have to talk to your county and get an event restaurant license or a temporary restaurant license, whatever your county does for food preparation that's supposed to be consumed on site. You'd still have to do that. If you're producing the juice at your farm with your produce, that's when this law comes into effect. I see a question about, may we make new products ahead of time that will fit into these rules and wait to sell them until after September? My first thought on this question is, if it's something that, especially if it's a product that's always been permitted and you're just looking into a new sales outlet that's permitted through this new law, I would say go ahead and make it before September, but do not sell it through that new channel until after that the effective date. And I think that as long as you're using approved recipes and you're not selling anything before that September 25th date, that's what I would think, that's okay. But Kelly, Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, if you're using a process that was added, I would wait to see the rules. If you're another option I want to mention is that for a number of these things that are made from fruit, you're allowed to freeze the fruit when it is ripe, and then you harvest it and then you can put it in the freezer. So I would stuff that in my freezer safely and wait to see what the exact rules are for any new, especially for any new process coming into the law, which isn't, there's two new processes, and the people that are doing the syrup, well, the OSU has a whole group of folks, and there's a lot of support for them. I wouldn't speak to that, but I would certainly be in touch with those folks about practice.
Yeah, I would agree with Rebecca. I mean, it'd be really too bad, right? If you put a lot of time and energy into something that's using one of the new processes and then find out after the fact that, you know, in some way, whatever, what you did doesn't conform to what the new rule looks like. And then you've put a lot of time and energy into that, and you can't sell it legally under the, whatever the new guidance is going to be.
So yes, I think that that is a good way to go about it, that if it's a product that was always allowed previous to Senate Bill 507, and you're just looking to sell it via consignment or through one of the online farmers markets that we talked about, you could go ahead and make that and wait to sell it through that new sales outlet. But if you are doing a juice or a freeze-dried product, do not jump the gun on the rules. And I see a question about frozen fruit. Rebecca was referencing freezing fruit before processing it into one of the approved products. Selling straight up bags of frozen fruit is still not covered under Farm Direct because there are too many risks in like a thaw, refreeze kind of situation. So if you are a blueberry farmer and you have so many blueberries and you can't process them all at once, you can throw some of them in the freezer and then make them into jam at a later date and sell that jam. But you can't just sell the blueberries under this law. Great. And then I see another question about kombucha. Will this make any changes for kombucha? I think Kelly's frozen. No,
I don't remember talking about kombucha in this phase. I know it was
Yeah.
it was not covered in the original law, and I don't remember if we got to, if that was something that actually made its way into the bill.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we didn't add it.
we did not address kombucha by name anywhere in this statute. I'm looking through the questions. I think we have covered all of the questions in the chat. And we are almost at time. I wanted to just say that we are planning an entire event about maple syrup production, and maple syrup is one of the biggest products that we added during this Farm Direct cycle. And since that product is intensely seasonal and requires a certain freeze thaw cycles to be present, you couldn't start producing it now anyway. So we are working with Eric Jones from OSU, the researcher who's been putting together that big leaf maple syrup cohort of folks. And we're going to have another one of these events that's all about maple syrup coming later this fall. So look out for that. And be sure to bring us all your maple syrup production questions. I am going to share just a couple more slides to wrap up. Okay. So in conclusion, no changes until September. ODA will be issuing further guidance. Stay up to date on rules and news on this topic with newsletters from my organization, Friends of Family Farmers, and your local extension office. And look out for that event regarding maple syrup coming this fall. We already did questions. And I would be remiss not to mention that we are in the middle of the Friends of Family Farmers summer membership drive. This week, your donation is being matched 1-to-1 up to the first $1,000 of donations via one of our generous supporters. And we would love to have you in our family. Also, this is the time of year when we do our membership gifts. So if you are interested in having a FOF tote bag, we know that that's not the reason that you donate, but it does help to be thanked for your contribution, and your donations make this work possible. So I'll put it in the chat, but head on over to friendsoffamilyfarmers.org/support if you're able to make a donation to support work like this. And thank you. We will be sending out a follow-up to this message, and to this event, and we will make sure that everyone has access to the recording. And we look forward to updating you as soon as we know more. We're on this journey with you and following it every step of the way. So thank you all so much for your time and attention today.